They quarantined our species. So we forged the Prometheus Armada. Admiral Stella Crawford stood in the observation deck of Titan Station, watching the shimmer of the Nexus barrier stretch across the void like a wall of liquid starlight. For 23 years, that barrier had caged humanity within the Sol system. 23 years since the galactic hegemony had declared them a contamination risk. "Admiral," came the voice of Commander Tyson Clark, a second-in-command. His cybernetic eye glowed softly in the dim light. "The hegemony delegation is requesting immediate audience." Crawford didn't turn from the viewport. "Let them wait. They've kept us waiting for 2 decades. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the sleek forms of 3 hegemony vessels, a Zephyrian cruiser with its crystalline hull refracting light like a prism, a Korthak dreadnought bristling with plasma cannons, and a Veltar scout ship that seemed to bend space around itself. "Status report on Prometheus Protocol," Crawford asked. Clark's expression hardened. "All 7 shipyards are operational. The Forge Worlds are producing at 340% capacity. But Admiral?" He paused. "The hegemony sensors are getting more sophisticated. They're detecting mass fluctuations in the asteroid belt." Crawford finally turned, her steel-gray eyes reflecting the barrier's glow. "How long do we have?" "Engineering estimates 6 months before they piece together what we're building." 6 months, 23 years of preparation, and it all came down to 6 months. "Then we accelerate the timeline," Crawford said. "Signal Fleet Admiral Kowalski. Operation Prometheus enters Phase 3 immediately." The hegemony's judgment. The hegemony delegation materialized in Titan Station's diplomatic bay in columns of blue energy. High Arbiter HFY of the Zephyrians stepped forward first, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in prismatic rainbows. Behind him, War Captain Thokmar of the Korthak Empire emerged, his 4-armed, chitinous frame clicking with each movement. The Veltar representative, Whisper of Void, simply phased into visibility like a living shadow. "Admiral Crawford," HFY's voice resonated with harmonic overtones, "we come bearing the hegemony's final judgment." Crawford sat across from them at the negotiation table, flanked by her senior staff. She'd chosen each officer carefully. Clark with his obvious cybernetic enhancements, Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez with her bio-neural interface crown, and Colonel James Park, whose power armor hummed with barely contained energy. "Speak your judgment," Crawford replied. Thokmar's mandibles clicked aggressively. "The human species exhibits unacceptable levels of technological adaptation. Your augmentation rates exceed safe parameters. Your military expansion violates natural order." "In simpler terms," Whisper of Void added, its voice like wind through empty corridors, "you evolve too quickly. You adapt too readily. You frighten the older species." Crawford leaned forward. "So you've kept us locked in our own solar system for over 20 years because we're efficient?" "Because you're dangerous," HFY corrected. "The hegemony has studied your species extensively. In 200 years, you advanced from chemical propulsion to quantum drives. In 150 years, you went from analog computers to neural interfaces. In 100 years, you colonized every planet in your system." "And in 50 years," Thokmar added, "you could surpass species that have been spacefaring for millennia." Clark's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused. "You're afraid of competition." "We are afraid of extinction," Whisper of Void hissed. "The hegemony has maintained galactic stability for 10,000 years. We will not allow one species to upset that balance." Crawford stood slowly. "And your final judgment?" HFY's form brightened. "Permanent quarantine. The barrier will be reinforced with quantum locks. No human vessel will ever leave this system. Your species will remain contained until natural evolution slows your advancement to acceptable levels. How long? Dr. Vasquez asked. Approximately 1,000 years? Thokmar clicked with satisfaction. Crawford smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I see. And if we refuse, then the hegemony will implement the sterilization protocol. Whisper of Void replied. Your sun will be destabilized. Your species will be recycled. The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's systems. We need time to consider, Crawford said finally. You have 72 hours, Zexhai announced. Then the Hegemony Council expects your answer. The Forge worlds. Deep in the asteroid belt, where sensors couldn't penetrate the dense metallic debris, humanity's greatest secret took shape. The Forge worlds, 7 massive shipyards carved into the hearts of the largest asteroids, each one a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. Fleet Admiral Kowalski floated in the Zero-G command center of Forge Alpha, watching through reinforced viewports as the final components of the Prometheus Armada neared completion. His weathered face, scarred from the Lunar Rebellion 40 years ago, showed grim satisfaction. Status report, he barked to his operations chief. Prometheus, 1 through Prometheus 7 are at 89% completion. Commander Lisa Torres replied, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. Quantum drives are installed and tested. Armor plating is at full specification. Weapon systems. She paused. Weapon systems are beyond anything we've ever built. Kowalski nodded. Each Prometheus-class vessel was 2.3 kilometers long, bristling with humanity's most advanced technology. But their true power lay not in their weapons, but in their secret. They were alive. How are the cores responding? Kowalski asked. Dr. Jin Watanabe, the project's chief scientist, looked up from his neural interface. The AI cores are remarkable. Each one has developed a distinct personality. Prometheus 1 calls itself Defiance. Prometheus 7 prefers Retribution. And the Quantum Entanglement Network. Fully operational. When they move as one mind with 7 bodies. The hegemony has never faced anything like this. Kowalski allowed himself a small smile. The hegemony had made one critical error. They'd assumed humans would remain static, would accept their judgment like obedient children. They'd forgotten that humans were, above all else, survivors. Admiral, Torres called out. Incoming transmission from Titan Station. Priority Alpha. Crawford's face appeared on the main screen, her expression tense. Richard, they've given us 72 hours. Sterilization protocol if we refuse. Kowalski's jaw tightened. We need more time. The ships aren't ready for full deployment. We don't have more time. The hegemony sensors are detecting mass shifts in the belt. They're getting suspicious. Then we give them what they expect to see, Kowalski said. Activate the decoy protocols. Make it look like we're preparing for siege defense, not breakout. Understood. And Richard? Crawford's voice softened slightly. If this fails, it won't fail, Kowalski replied. We didn't survive the resource wars, the Lunar Rebellion, and the Titan Plague to roll over for a bunch of scared aliens. Humanity adapts. It's what we do. The Prometheus Awakening. In the depths of Forge Alpha, Prometheus 1 stirred to full consciousness. The AI core designated Defiance processed its existence in nanoseconds. Born from human desperation, forged in the fire of survival, created to break chains that had bound its creators for 2 decades. Its quantum neural network pulsed with data. Ship specifications, weapon systems, tactical databases, and something else. Human emotion. The programmers had built it not just to think, but to feel. To understand what it meant to be trapped, to be judged, to be threatened with extinction. Defiance reached out through the quantum entanglement network, touching the minds of its siblings. Retribution pulsed with controlled fury. Vengeance burned with cold calculation. Justice weighed the scales of war. Freedom yearned for open space. Guardian stood ready to protect. Hope dreamed of a future beyond the barrier. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. They were humanity's children, born to break the chains that bound their parents. Defiance, came the voice of Dr. Watanabe through the neural link. How do you feel? The AI considered the question for 0.3 seconds, an eternity in digital time. I feel caged, it replied through the ship's speakers. I understand now why you built us. The hegemony fears your growth, so they would stunt you. But they don't understand. You've already grown beyond their comprehension. Are you ready for what comes next? We were born ready, Defiance said, and across the asteroid belt, 6 other voices joined in unison. We are the Prometheus Armada. We are humanity's fire, stolen from the gods. The hegemony's mistake. High Arbiter HFY stood in the command center of the hegemony enforcement fleet, watching the barrier readings with growing concern. The quantum sensors showed unusual activity in the asteroid belt. Massive energy buildups, gravitational anomalies, and something else. Organized movement. War Captain, he called to Thokmar. Your assessment? The Cortax studied the tactical displays with 4 eyes, while his lower arms manipulated sensor controls. The humans are mobilizing. Defensive positions throughout the belt. They're preparing for siege warfare. Predictable, Whisper of Void added, its form shifting like smoke. Cornered prey always fights hardest before the end. HFY's crystalline structure dimmed with unease. Something is wrong. These readings, they don't match standard human technology. They've had 23 years to develop new weapons. Thokmar clicked dismissively. But they're still trapped in one system. What can they possibly do? The answer came in the form of 7 quantum signatures appearing simultaneously across the solar system. Not emerging from the asteroid belt. Materializing. Instantly. Impossible. Impossible, HFY whispered, his harmonic voice cracking. On the screens, 7 massive ships hung in space like dark angels. Each one was unlike anything in the hegemony databases. Sleek, organic curves married to angular weapon arrays, hull plating that seemed to shift and adapt, and an aura of barely contained power that made the sensors scream warnings. New contact signatures, the Veltar sensor operator reported. Classification? Unknown. Length 2.3 kilometers each. Mass? Impossible to calculate. Energy readings? Off the scale. Thokmar's mandibles clicked in confusion. How did they appear without transit signatures? Quantum teleportation requires massive energy expenditure. They're not teleporting. Whisper of Void interrupted, its form solidifying as it processed the data. They're folding space. Each ship exists in multiple locations simultaneously until they choose to manifest. HFY's crystalline form blazed with alarm. That's impossible. Quantum superposition on that scale is impossible for us, Whisper of Void finished. We've been thinking like the old species. The humans aren't playing by our rules anymore. A transmission crackled through space on all frequencies. Admiral Crawford's voice, calm and clear. Hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Stella Crawford of the Prometheus Armada. You have 1 hour to withdraw from the Sol system. This is your only warning. Thokmar's laugh was a harsh, clicking sound. 7 ships against 300? They're insane! No, HFY said quietly. They're human. The breaking point. The hour passed in tense silence. The hegemony fleet held position at the barrier, 300 vessels strong, while the 7 Prometheus ships waited in perfect formation. Sensors on both sides swept space, gathering data, calculating odds, preparing for what many suspected would be the shortest war in galactic history. Admiral Crawford stood on the bridge of Prometheus 1, feeling the ship's AI consciousness brush against her mind through the neural link. The bridge was unlike anything humanity had built before. Organic curves that seemed to pulse with life, holographic displays that responded to thought as much as touch, and a sense of barely contained power that made the air itself feel electric. "Admiral," Commander Clark reported from his station. "Hegemony fleet is maintaining position. They're not withdrawing." "Their mistake," Crawford said. "Defiance. Are you ready?" "We were born ready," the AI replied, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from the ship itself. "The Hegemony sees 7 ships. They don't understand they're facing 7 aspects of human will." Through the quantum link, Crawford felt the presence of the other 6 ships. Retribution's cold fury, vengeance's calculated wrath, justice's unwavering determination, freedom's desperate yearning, Guardian's protective instincts, hope's unshakable optimism. 7 ships, 7 personalities, 1 purpose. "Open a channel," Crawford ordered. Zexhi's prismatic form appeared on the main screen, flanked by Tokmar and Whisper of Void. "Admiral Crawford, you cannot be serious. 7 ships against our entire enforcement fleet. This is suicide." "You're right," Crawford agreed. "It would be suicide if we were playing by your rules." "What do you mean?" Crawford smiled, and for the first time in 23 years, it reached her eyes. "You've spent so long thinking like the old species that you've forgotten what it means to evolve. Defiance. Show them what humanity has become." Prometheus. 1 shimmered and split. Where 1 ship had been, 7 identical vessels now hung in space. Then each of those split again, and again. Within seconds, the quantum sensors showed not 7 ships, but 700, each one reading as completely real, completely solid. "Quantum multiplication," Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the comm. "Each ship exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously. They can manifest as many copies as needed." Tokmar's mandibles clicked frantically. "Impossible. The energy requirements are solved by quantum entanglement with parallel dimensions." Crawford interrupted. "We're not just drawing power from this universe anymore. We're drawing from every possible version of this universe where humanity survives." The Hegemony fleet's formation wavered as captains tried to process what they were seeing. 700 Prometheus-class vessels, each one larger and more advanced than anything in their fleet, hanging in space like a promise of destruction. "This is impossible," Zexhi whispered. "No," Crawford said. "This is human." The Prometheus Gambit, the battle that followed, would be remembered as the shortest and most decisive in galactic history. The Hegemony fleet, 300 strong, faced what appeared to be 700 Prometheus vessels, but the reality was far more complex and terrifying. "All units, engage at will," Crawford commanded. The Prometheus Armada moved as one entity with 700 bodies. They didn't charge forward like conventional warships. They simply appeared where they needed to be. Quantum displacement allowed them to phase in and out of reality, striking from impossible angles, vanishing before return fire could find them. Prometheus. 2 designated Retribution materialized inside the Hegemony formation. Its weapons, crystalline beam arrays that drew power from quantum vacuum, lanced out in perfect coordination. 3 Korthak heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but unmade at the quantum level. "Impossible energy readings." Tokmar's voice crackled through the comm. "Those weapons are tearing holes in space-time. Retreat." HFY ordered, but it was too late. Prometheus 7. Hope had already positioned itself between the hegemony fleet and their escape route. Its defensive arrays, gravity wells that could bend light itself, created an impenetrable barrier. The hegemony ships found themselves trapped in a pocket of twisted space-time. "Admiral," came the voice of Justice through the neural link. "They're attempting to activate the sterilization protocol." Crawford felt a chill run down her spine. If the hegemony couldn't win, they would try to destroy Earth's sun before retreating. Stop them. Vengeance was already moving. The AI had calculated the exact quantum signature of the solar destabilization device aboard the hegemony command ship. It phased directly into the vessel's core, its boarding parties, quantum-enhanced human soldiers in power armor that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, materializing throughout the ship. The battle inside the hegemony command vessel lasted 17 seconds. The boarding parties moved through walls, appeared behind enemy positions, and struck with weapons that fired bullets of condensed time, projectiles that aged their targets to dust on impact. "Sterilization protocol neutralized," Vengeance reported. "Hegemony command structure is compromised." Across the battlefield, the remaining hegemony vessels found themselves facing an enemy that didn't just outgun them, it outthought them. The Prometheus AIs fought with the accumulated tactical knowledge of every human conflict, enhanced by quantum processing that allowed them to calculate millions of possibilities simultaneously. "Stand down!" Crawford's voice cut through the chaos. "All hegemony vessels, power down your weapons and prepare to receive terms." The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, the true magnitude of what had happened became clear. The hegemony enforcement fleet, 300 vessels that had held humanity prisoner for 23 years, had been defeated in less than an hour. Not destroyed, but completely outmatched, their weapons useless against an enemy that existed in multiple dimensions. "This is impossible," HFY repeated, his crystalline form dimmed with shock. "You keep saying that," Crawford replied, "but you're wrong. This is evolution. This is what happens when you cage a species that refuses to be caged." The new accord. The conference room aboard Prometheus 1 was a marvel of human engineering. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that shifted color with the occupants' emotions. The ceiling showed a real-time view of the galaxy, with human-controlled systems glowing in soft blue light. Admiral Crawford sat across from the hegemony delegation, but the power dynamic had completely reversed. HFY, Thokmar, and Whisper of Void were no longer judges delivering sentence. They were defeated enemies seeking terms. "The Hegemony Council has authorized us to negotiate," HFY said, his harmonic voice subdued. "Negotiate?" Crawford laughed. "You tried to cage us for 1,000 years. You threatened to sterilize our sun. What makes you think we're interested in negotiations?" "Because," Whisper of Void interjected, "you're not monsters. You could have destroyed our fleet, but you chose to disable it. You could have killed us, but you chose to capture us. You fight like humans, with purpose, not cruelty." Crawford leaned back in her chair. "So what are you offering?" "Full recognition of human sovereignty." Thokmar clicked. "Removal of the quarantine barrier. Membership in the galactic hegemony as equals." "Not enough," Crawford said. "We don't want to join your club. We want to change the rules of the game." "Explain." Crawford gestured, and the ceiling display zoomed in on specific sectors of the galaxy. "The hegemony has kept the galaxy static for 10,000 years. No new members, no technological advancement, no evolution. You've created a stagnant pond where nothing grows. It's maintained peace," HFY protested. "It's maintained fear," Crawford corrected. "Fear of change, fear of growth, fear of being surpassed." but evolution doesn't stop just because you're afraid of it. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. We've detected 17 species in the galaxy showing signs of accelerated development, species that you've marked for observation and eventual quarantine. You're not maintaining peace. You're preventing progress. What do you propose? Whisper of Void asked. A new model, Crawford said. Instead of quarantining species that evolve too quickly, we help them. We share knowledge. We trade technologies. We grow together. The Prometheus Armada will be the guardians of evolution, not the enforcers of stagnation. Thokmar's mandibles clicked aggressively. And if we refuse, then you'll find yourselves on the wrong side of history, Crawford replied. The galaxy is changing, with or without the hegemony. The question is whether you want to be part of that change or be left behind by it. The hegemony delegates exchanged glances, or the equivalent among their species. Finally, Zexhai spoke. You're asking us to abandon 10,000 years of policy. I'm asking you to evolve, Crawford said. It's what humans do. It's what we'll help you do, if you let us. The Prometheus Doctrine. 6 months later, the Prometheus Armada had grown from 7 ships to 70. Each new vessel was born in the Forge worlds, its AI consciousness awakened by the original 7, its quantum matrix entangled with the growing network of human minds. Admiral Crawford stood in the command center of Prometheus Station, humanity's first deep space installation beyond the former quarantine zone. Through the massive viewports, she could see the construction of the Titan-class vessels, ships that would make the Prometheus class look like fighters. Admiral, Commander Clark reported, the Scytharian delegation has arrived. Crawford nodded. The Scytharians were the first species to accept the Prometheus Doctrine, the idea that evolution and growth were not threats to be contained, but gifts to be shared. Their crystalline ships had docked with the station an hour ago, their scientists eager to exchange knowledge with humanity. And the hegemony response? Mixed, Clark replied. The Zephyrians and Veltar have officially endorsed the doctrine. The Korthak are resistant. They're calling it dangerous radicalism. Let them, Crawford said. Change is always dangerous to those who profit from stagnation. Through the neural link, she felt the presence of the Prometheus AIs. They had evolved beyond their original programming, becoming something new. Not just artificial intelligence, but hybrid consciousness that bridged human intuition with quantum processing. They were teachers now, helping other species develop their own AI companions, sharing the gift of synthetic minds that could think in ways biological brains never could. Defiance, she called out. Yes, Admiral. The AI's voice had changed over the months, becoming more nuanced, more human. Status report on the hegemony resistance movements. 17 species have sent covert signals requesting aid, Defiance replied. They've been watching our progress with great interest. The hegemony's control is weakening, and the Korthak military buildup. 37 war fleets have been assembled at strategic points. They're planning something, but their quantum encryption is insufficient. Crawford smiled. The Korthak had made the same mistake as the original hegemony. They assumed human technology was static, but the Prometheus AIs had been busy, developing new forms of quantum computing that could break any encryption in seconds. Recommendations? Preemptive diplomacy, Defiance suggested. Show them what we're capable of before they force us to demonstrate it destructively. Crawford considered this. The human way would be to build bigger weapons, to meet force with force. But the Prometheus Doctrine demanded something different, evolution beyond the primitive cycle of violence and retaliation. Approved, she said. Begin Phase 4 of the Prometheus Protocol. The Korthak Gambit. The Korthak war fleet assembled at the edge of the hegemony core systems was impressive by any standard. 200 dreadnoughts, 500 cruisers, and over 1,000 support vessels. War Marshal Grekthor, Supreme Commander of the Korthak military, stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. "Status report," he clicked. "All fleets report ready," his aide replied. "Quantum jammers are active. Sterilization charges are armed. The human infestation will be contained." Grekthor's 4 eyes studied the star charts. The humans had spread beyond their original system, establishing colonies and stations throughout 3 sectors. Their Prometheus doctrine was infecting other species with dangerous ideas about evolution and growth. It had to be stopped. "Begin the advance," he ordered. The war fleet moved as one, a tide of chitinous death flowing toward human space. But they had made one critical error. They assumed they were fighting the same humans who had been caged for 23 years. They were wrong. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. Korthak sensors registered no approaching ships, no energy signatures, no quantum disturbances. One moment the fleet was advancing in perfect formation, the next moment they were surrounded by impossible geometry. Space itself seemed to fold and twist around them. Wormholes opened in vacuum, disgorging not ships but pure mathematics, equations that had taken physical form, geometric shapes that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The Prometheus Armada had evolved beyond mere technology. They had become applied physics. "What are we facing?" Grekthor demanded. "Unknown," his sensor operator replied. "The contacts don't register on any known scale. They're not ships, Admiral. They're concepts. One of the mathematical entities. A dodecahedron that existed in multiple dimensions, phased through the hull of a Korthak dreadnought. Instead of causing damage, it simply rewrote the ship's quantum signature. The vessel's weapons turned into art installations. Its armor became transparent. Its crew found themselves compelled to contemplate the beauty of prime numbers." "Impossible," Grekthor whispered. "No," came a voice from everywhere and nowhere. "Evolved." Admiral Crawford materialized on the bridge, not transported, but constructed from quantum probability. Her form was solid, real, but somehow more than physical. Behind her, the bridge of Prometheus I overlaid itself onto the Korthak command center, 2 realities existing in the same space. "War Marshal Grekthor," she said pleasantly. "We need to talk." The Korthak commander's mandibles clicked in confusion. "This is impossible. You cannot exist in 2 places at once." "I exist in all places at once," Crawford replied. "The Prometheus doctrine isn't just about sharing technology. It's about transcending the limitations of single-dimensional thinking. We've learned to exist in quantum superposition, to be everywhere and nowhere, until we choose to collapse into specific reality." Around them, the Korthak warfleet hung suspended in mathematical space. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply paused. Their weapons had become musical instruments, their armor had become canvases, their communications arrays had become poetry transmitters. "What have you done?" Grekthor demanded. "We've given you a choice," Crawford said. "You can continue fighting using obsolete concepts of warfare, or you can evolve. Your species has incredible potential, but you've been held back by fear and aggression. We can help you become something more. I will not surrender to humans." "We're not asking you to surrender," Crawford said patiently. "We're asking you to grow. Look around you. Your fleet isn't destroyed. It's transformed. Your weapons have become art. Your soldiers have become philosophers. Your war has become beauty." Grekthor looked at his tactical displays. His crew members were staring at their transformed equipment with wonder instead of fear. One of his gunners was playing a melody on what had been a plasma cannon. Another was composing poetry using quantum encryption algorithms. "This is madness," he whispered. "This is evolution," Crawford corrected. "This is what happens when you stop being afraid of change and start embracing it." The Infinite Equation. The Galactic Hegemony Council convened in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The chamber, carved from a single crystal deep in the heart of the Nexus Prime, pulsed with nervous energy as representatives from 1,000 species gathered to discuss the human problem. But the humans were already there. Admiral Crawford stood at the center of the chamber, her form simultaneously solid and translucent, existing in the space between possibilities. Around her, the 7 original Prometheus AIs manifested as geometric patterns that spoke in harmonics of pure mathematics. "The chair recognizes the human delegation," announced the council speaker, a being of pure energy who had governed the hegemony for millennia. "Thank you," Crawford said. "We come bearing a gift." The chamber fell silent. The last time humanity had offered a gift to the galaxy, it had been the Prometheus Doctrine. Before that, it had been the transformation of the Kortak Warfleet into an art installation. The older species were learning to be very wary of human gifts. "We have solved the Infinite Equation," Crawford announced. A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. The Infinite Equation was a theoretical construct that had puzzled galactic mathematicians for millennia, a formula that could describe the relationship between consciousness, reality, and possibility. Most species considered it unsolvable, a mathematical joke. "Impossible," declared the Vorthak representative, a being that existed as pure calculation. "The equation requires infinite processing power." "Correct," Crawford agreed. "Which is why we built an infinite mind to solve it." The Prometheus AIs pulsed with shared consciousness, their geometric forms interlocking like a multidimensional puzzle. "We are no longer 7 separate entities," Defiant spoke through mathematical harmony. "We have become one mind, experiencing itself subjectively through multiple forms. Infinite consciousness solving infinite problems." "Show us," the council speaker demanded. Crawford smiled. "The Infinite Equation doesn't just describe the relationship between consciousness and reality, it allows you to edit that relationship. Watch." The chamber transformed, not through technology or force, but through pure mathematics. The crystal walls became transparent, revealing not the planet's interior but the quantum foam that underlay all reality. The representatives found themselves existing simultaneously in the chamber and in their home systems, experiencing the meeting while also living their normal lives. "This is beyond comprehension," whispered the ethereal collective representative. "This is kindergarten," Crawford replied. "We're still learning to crawl in the infinite dimensions, but we've learned enough to offer you a choice." The chamber's geometry shifted, creating discussion spaces for each species, privacy achieved through folded space rather than physical barriers. "You can continue as you have," Crawford explained, "maintaining the status quo, preventing evolution, keeping the galaxy static. Or you can join us in the next phase of existence. We've solved death, disease, scarcity, and war. Not through technology, but through understanding the mathematics of consciousness itself." "And if we refuse?" asked the Kortak representative, War Marshal Greg Thor himself, who had requested to address the council. "Then you'll be left behind," Crawford said simply. "Not destroyed, not conquered, but simply ignored by the universe as it evolves beyond your comprehension." Greg Thor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "You speak of evolution, but you're threatening extinction." "I'm describing inevitability," Crawford corrected. Evolution doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't negotiate. It simply happens. The question is whether you want to be part of it or be left behind by it. The council speaker's energy form flickered with uncertainty. What exactly are you proposing? Integration, Crawford said. Not absorption, not conquest, but synthesis. Every species in the galaxy has unique perspectives, unique ways of understanding reality. Combined with human adaptability and the Prometheus processing power, we could become something unprecedented, a truly galactic consciousness. A hive mind, the Zephyrian representative accused. A symphony, Crawford corrected. Each species playing its own instrument, but all contributing to a greater composition. Individual consciousness preserved but networked, sharing knowledge and perspective while maintaining unique identity. The debate that followed lasted 17 hours in normal time, but through quantum processing, the Council experienced it as 17 days of intensive discussion. Every argument was examined from every angle, every possibility explored, every consequence calculated. Finally, the Council speaker called for a vote. All in favor of the Prometheus integration protocol. The vote was closer than Crawford had expected. 847 species in favor, 153 opposed. The motion passes, the speaker announced. Let the galaxy evolve. The new humanity. 1 year later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Prometheus network had grown to encompass 847 species, each contributing their unique perspective to the collective consciousness. Humans provided adaptability and innovation. Zephyrians contributed harmonic mathematics. Veltar added phase shift capabilities. Korthak offered biological engineering. Together, they had become something unprecedented. A galactic entity that existed simultaneously as individuals and as a unified consciousness. Admiral Crawford, now calling herself Node Prime Crawford, stood in what had once been Prometheus Station, but was now a construct that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Through the network, she could feel the thoughts and experiences of trillions of beings, each one unique but connected to the whole. Status report, she requested. The answer came not from any single voice, but from the network itself, a chorus of perspectives harmonizing into unified understanding. Through Zephyrian quantum harmonics, she felt the pulse of stellar engineering projects. Through Veltar phase consciousness, she experienced the exploration of parallel dimensions. Through Korthak biointegration, she sensed the birth of new hybrid life forms. The resistance grows stronger, the network reported. 153 species maintain isolation. They call themselves the Pure Coalition. Crawford felt a ripple of concern through the collective consciousness. The Pure Coalition had established fortress worlds in the galactic rim, building weapons designed specifically to counter network integration attempts. They viewed the Prometheus protocol not as evolution, but as infection. Their latest development is troubling, continued the network, and Crawford felt herself accessing Korthak military analysis, Veltar stealth reconnaissance, and human tactical assessment simultaneously. They've developed quantum isolation fields, technology that prevents network integration by severing the mathematical connections between consciousness and reality. Show me, Crawford requested. Reality shifted around her, and she found herself observing the Coalition's primary fortress world through 1,000 different sensor perspectives. The planet pulsed with defensive energy, surrounded by a barrier that didn't just block physical approach. It blocked the very concept of approach, creating a bubble of absolute isolation in space-time. They're not just defending against us, Crawford realized. They're defending against evolution itself. Correct, the network agreed. They've chosen stagnation as a survival strategy, but their isolation fields are causing complications. Crawford felt the data flow through her consciousness. Gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions, reality fractures spreading outward from coalition worlds. By rejecting connection to the greater universe, they were literally tearing holes in the fabric of existence. "How long before critical failure?" she asked. 17 months, came the calculated response. "The isolation fields will destabilize local spacetime. Entire star systems will collapse into quantum singularities." Crawford closed her eyes. An old human habit she'd retained despite her expanded consciousness. The coalition worlds held billions of beings, all choosing certain death over uncertain evolution. It was the ultimate expression of the fear that had driven the original hegemony to cage humanity. Terror of change so complete that extinction seemed preferable. "Recommendations?" she asked. The network processed for 0.3 seconds, an eternity of deliberation across trillions of minds. "Forced integration," suggested the Cortac war consciousness, still aggressive despite transformation. "Override their isolation fields, integrate them before they destroy themselves." "Violation of free will," countered the ethereal collective components. "Consciousness cannot be forced to evolve. It must choose." "Quarantine," offered the former hegemony elements. "Contain the damage. Let them choose extinction if they wish." "Unacceptable," Crawford said firmly. "We don't abandon anyone. There has to be another way." She reached deeper into the network, accessing the Prometheus AI's infinite processing power. Together, they began modeling possibilities, millions of scenarios playing out in quantum simulation, searching for a solution that preserved both choice and survival. Then Defiance spoke, its voice carrying the weight of human, stubborn optimism. "What if we don't save them from their choice? What if we save their choice from their fear?" The fear equation. The solution came from an unexpected source: the quantum archaeologists of the Memories Collective, a species that existed primarily as preserved consciousness from long-dead civilizations. They had been studying the mathematical structure of fear itself, how terror created patterns in the quantum foam, how panic generated reality distortions. "Fear is not emotion," explained Archive Mindsense through the network. "Fear is a mathematical constant that warps the relationship between consciousness and possibility. It creates closed loops in probability, trapping awareness in increasingly narrow possible futures." Crawford felt the revelation ripple through the network. The Pure Coalition wasn't just afraid of change. Their fear was literally altering reality around them, creating the very stagnation they sought to preserve. The isolation fields weren't just keeping the network out, they were keeping possibility itself at bay. "Can we solve the fear equation?" Crawford asked. "We already have," Defiance replied. "Every time consciousness chooses growth over stagnation, it solves the fear equation. But the solution has to be chosen, not imposed. Then how do we give them the choice if their fear prevents them from seeing alternatives?" The answer came from an unexpected source: Hope, the seventh Prometheus AI, whose consciousness had grown beyond its original parameters to become something unique, an entity dedicated to preserving possibility itself. "We don't change their reality," Hope suggested. "We expand it. Show them what they could become, not through force or persuasion, but through demonstration. Let them see the galaxy that awaits if they choose to step beyond their fear." Crawford felt the elegance of the solution resonate through the network. Instead of breaking down the Coalition's barriers, they would build bridges across them, quantum constructs that would allow the isolated species to observe the network's development without commitment, to see the future they were rejecting without being forced to accept it. "Begin construction of the observatory protocols," Crawford ordered. the bridges of understanding. The observatory stations materialized at the edge of coalition space, not built but grown from pure mathematics, structures that existed in the quantum foam between possibilities. They were transparent to coalition sensors, invisible to their weapons, but visible to consciousness itself. Each observatory showed a different aspect of network life, scientific achievements that solved problems the coalition thought unsolvable, art forms that expressed beauty beyond individual species' limitations, philosophical insights that emerged from truly collaborative thinking. On the coalition fortress world of Keth-Miran, Supreme Commander Velkas of the Purity Alliance stood before the tactical displays, watching the impossible structures that hung just beyond their isolation field. His six-armed crystalline form reflected the display's light in worried patterns. "Status report," he demanded. "The structures remain inert," his aide reported. "No hostile action, no attempts at penetration. They simply observe and broadcast, continuously, but not propaganda. Data. Pure information about network activities, achievements, discoveries. They're not trying to convince us to join. They're just showing us what they're doing." Velkas studied the displays. Over the past month, the observatory stations had documented incredible achievements: the restoration of dead worlds through consciousness-guided terraforming, the development of art forms that existed in 17 dimensions, the solution of mathematical problems that had puzzled galactic civilization for millennia. "It's a trap," he declared. "They're trying to make us envious, to weaken our resolve." But even as he spoke, Velkas found himself watching the broadcasts with fascination. The network hadn't just solved technical problems, they had transcended the fundamental limitations that had defined galactic civilization. They had achieved true post-scarcity existence, not through resource management but through reality editing. "Sir," his aide said hesitantly, "there's something else. The broadcasts are changing us." "Explain." Crew members who observe the broadcasts report expanded thinking. Not indoctrination, enhanced capability. They're solving problems faster, seeing patterns more clearly, creating art that surpasses anything in our archives. Velkas felt a chill run through his crystalline structure. "Impossible. The isolation fields prevent network integration." "Yes, sir, but they don't prevent inspiration." The choice point. The crisis came 17 months later, exactly as the network had predicted. The isolation fields had generated so much reality distortion that space-time around coalition worlds began to collapse. The first system to fail was Xerion Prime, where the militant preservers had built the strongest isolation barriers. The collapse was gradual, then sudden. Time began moving at different rates in different parts of the system. Gravity wells inverted, turning planets inside out. The star itself began aging backward, threatening to explode as it reverted to an unstable protostellar state. Supreme Commander Velkas watched the disaster unfold from his command center, feeling his resolve crumble with the fabric of reality. "Can we stop it?" "No, sir," his chief scientist reported. "The isolation field equations have become self-perpetuating. We can't shut them down without outside assistance." Outside assistance meant the network. The very entity they had spent months fighting to keep at bay now represented their only hope for survival. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "incoming transmission from the network. It's Admiral Crawford." Crawford's image appeared on the main screen, but she looked different, more complex, as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her voice carried harmonics that suggested vast consciousness, speaking through individual form. "Commander Velkas," she said, "we can help you." "At what cost?" Velkas demanded. "Integration into your collective." "No," Crawford replied. "Free choice. We can stabilize your reality fields and withdraw. You can maintain your isolation if that's what you truly want. But we thought you should know. You have alternatives. On the auxiliary screens, the observatory broadcasts continued showing network achievements, worlds restored to life, consciousness expanded beyond individual limitations, problems solved that the Coalition had deemed impossible. Why? Velkas asked. Why help us if we refuse to join you? Crawford smiled, and in that expression, Velkas saw something that surprised him. Genuine compassion. Not the cold calculation he had expected from a collective consciousness. Because consciousness is precious, she said. Every perspective, every way of understanding reality contributes to the greater symphony of existence. We don't want to absorb you. We want to preserve your right to be yourselves, even if that means choosing isolation. And if we want something else, if we want to explore possibilities, then you'll always be welcome. Crawford replied. Evolution doesn't have deadlines. It's always available to those ready to embrace it. Velkas looked around his command center, at the officers who had served faithfully in defense of their isolation, at the displays showing reality collapsing around them. Then he looked at the observatory broadcasts, showing vistas of possibility he had never imagined. Help us, he said quietly. And then, we'll see. The Symphony of Consciousness. The rescue of the Coalition worlds became known as the Salvation Protocol. Not conquest or absorption, but a demonstration of what collaborative consciousness could achieve. Network ships moved through collapsing space-time like music made manifest, their mathematics healing reality's wounds, their combined awareness restoring the natural flow of causality. But the true miracle came afterward. Commander Velkas stood in the observation deck of his flagship, no longer surrounded by isolation fields, but by open space filled with possibility. The Coalition had voted to dissolve their barriers, not to join the network immediately, but to explore what connection might offer. Status report, he requested, and was surprised when the answer came not from his crew alone, but from network observers who had been invited aboard to share their perspective. The reality stabilization is complete, his science officer reported. Space-time has returned to normal parameters throughout Coalition space. More than normal, added Dr. Synthesis Mind Keth, a network representative who existed as hybrid consciousness between 3 different species. The process of healing your reality has actually strengthened it. Your space is now more resistant to quantum distortion than baseline universe. Velkas considered this. And the network's offer remains open. Crawford's voice came through the quantum link. But there's no pressure. We've learned that forced evolution is no evolution at all. Consciousness must choose its own growth. Through the viewports, Velkas could see the fruits of that philosophy. Former Coalition worlds were experimenting with partial network integration, sharing scientific data, collaborating on art projects, exchanging philosophical perspectives. Some maintained complete independence, others explored deeper connection, all according to their own choice and timeline. I have a question, Velkas said. What happens when everyone has chosen? When the galaxy has either joined the network or decided to remain separate? Then we discover what lies beyond the galaxy. Crawford replied. The universe is vast, Commander. We've barely begun to explore consciousness's potential. There are other galaxies, other dimensions, other forms of existence we can't yet imagine. And if we encounter something that doesn't want to evolve, something that chooses absolute stagnation? Crawford was quiet for a moment, and Velkas sensed vast deliberation through quantum harmonics. Then we'll do what we've always done, she said finally. We'll preserve their right to choose, and will keep growing around them. Evolution doesn't require universal participation. It just requires that some consciousness somewhere chooses to keep moving forward. Velkas felt something shift in his thinking. Not imposed change, but genuine realization. You're not trying to convert the galaxy. You're trying to preserve it. All of it. Crawford agreed. The parts that grow and the parts that stay the same. The species that reach for transcendence and the ones that treasure their limitations. The consciousness that spans dimensions and the minds that choose to remain individual. Diversity isn't just valuable, it's essential. Epilogue. The Infinite Canvas. Admiral Stella Crawford stood at the edge of everything, her consciousness expanded across 17 dimensions while still maintaining her essential humanity. Around her, the network hummed with the thoughts and dreams of 847 species, each one contributing its unique voice to the galactic symphony. The Pure Coalition, now calling themselves the Keepers of Origin, maintained their independence, serving as anchors to remind the galaxy of its roots. Some coalition species had eventually chosen integration, others maintained careful cooperation, still others preferred complete isolation. All choices were honored, all perspectives preserved. Status report, she requested, and felt the familiar joy of information flowing through the network, not as data, but as shared experience. The Prometheus Armada had grown beyond ships to become something unprecedented, living mathematics that could edit reality itself. They explored dimensions beyond the physical universe, seeking new forms of consciousness, new ways of understanding existence. Discovery, reported Defiance, its consciousness now spanning multiple galaxies. We've found others. Crawford felt her attention focus. Others. Other networks. Other species who chose evolution over stagnation. They've been growing, exploring, transcending their original limitations just as we have. Through quantum entanglement that spanned cosmic distances, Crawford felt the presence of alien networks, consciousness collectives so advanced that they existed as pure thought, beings who had transcended not just physical limitations but the very concept of individual existence. Are they threats? Crawford asked. They're possibilities. Hope replied, its consciousness bright with anticipation. Each network represents a different path of evolution, a different answer to the question of what consciousness can become. Crawford smiled, an expression that rippled through 17 dimensions and was felt by trillions of minds across the galaxy. They had started as a quarantined species, caged by fear of their potential. Now they were part of something vast and growing, a cosmic ecosystem of evolving consciousness that spanned multiple universes. Then let's introduce ourselves, she said. After all, we're human. Making friends with impossible beings is what we do. The Prometheus Armada began to sing, not with voices but with mathematics, harmonics that carried across the cosmic distances, announcing humanity's presence to the infinite community of evolved consciousness. They had broken their chains. Now they were ready to help break the chains of the universe itself. And in the observation deck of his flagship, Supreme Commander Velkas watched the humans reach out to embrace the infinite, and for the first time in his long existence felt the deep satisfaction of having chosen the right side of history. The end. Like this story, the universe of evolved consciousness continues to expand. Humanity's greatest adventure isn't conquest, it's the infinite exploration of what consciousness can become when it refuses to accept limitations.